Welcome, everyone. It's a great pleasure and also a great zechut, holy sacred privilege for me to welcome you all to this conversation with Merle Feld. I'm going to read her bio and say a couple of personal words. Merle Feld is a widely published poet, award-winning playwright, peace activist, and educator who has pioneered teaching writing as a spiritual practice. Her latest book is Longing, Poems of a Life, CCR Press, 2023. And her prose and poetry, including her signature poem about women and men standing at Sinai, can be found in numerous anthologies and prayer books. She's also the author of a highly acclaimed memoir, A Spiritual Life, exploring the heart and Jewish tradition, and Finding Words, a book of poems. Her theater credits include Returning, Across the Jordan, and The Gates Are Closing. A popular teacher internationally, Feld facilitated ongoing Israeli-Palestinian dialogue on the West Bank during the First Intifada and at Seeds of Peace. She has also worked with grassroots women community organizers in Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. She serves as founding director of the Rabbinic Writing Institute, established in 2005, guiding rabbis across 5 denominations to develop and explore their own inner lives to more effectively serve as spiritual leaders. So the personal bit is just that I've been very lucky, very, very lucky indeed to be one of those trainee rabbis and then rabbis. And it's been just a source of tremendous growth in my journey and development in the deepest ways to work with you, Merle. So thank you for coming and joining us tonight Israel time, today in your time, and for this opportunity.
It's hard to begin if you're going to start by making me cry.
Oh, good. That's the best way to start.
So,
I have an opening question that hopefully will be a launch pad into many others. And I just want to say again to everyone here, if you have questions and things you want to share as you go, please put them in the chat, and then we'll find the right moment to come back to them. So my opening question is, and I hope this works for you, why do you write?
in a way, that's like asking me, why do I breathe? How can I not? I wrote from the time I was a very young child, with an interruption of a few years in my 20s. I've always been a writer. I think there are many ways to answer that question. So that's kind of a foundation on which to build. I write because, as I once said, in a long ago anthology, there was a little interview with me before my poems. And I said, I write to visit with my own lonely soul. And I think that throughout the years, that has continued to be true. There's a way in which just thinking about things can become ruminative and not really very productive. I think, like lots of people, I find when I'm thinking about something that's important for me to resolve, I'm kind of going in circles. So writing is a way for me to make some actual progress. I write in answer to a question, and then a question that I'm offering to myself when people like you and many of your rabbinic colleagues across denominations when you all write with me, I'm giving you a prompt, right? We have a conversation, and then I give you a prompt that I think will open something. So when I'm writing by myself, I have to give myself my own prompts, but it works okay. And then I just sit very quietly and try to go to a deep place, probably with my eyes closed. And I keep peeling back the layers, the busyness of what's going on in the day, the endless list of what I need to do, looking for what's calling to me underneath that. I describe this on my website, Merle. If you look under the heading of Write for Your Life, you'll see instructions on how to create a writing practice for yourself. So I write because I want to try to better understand myself and quiet some of the tohu vavohu that keeps surfacing, the primordial chaos in my heart, in my mind, in my soul, and quiet it so that I can really look at it and see what's there, what's going on there. And one question leads to another. So that explains why I write. It doesn't explain why I publish, which is a different question. So I don't know if that's a question you want to get into or else. Yes, okay. Can you remind me, this is ridiculous. Can you remind me how I would pin you?
Oh, you want to pin me?
Yeah,
That would, I think, if you look at the picture of me and you put the mouse over me, then are there 3 dots in the top corner?
right.
Then if you click on that, one of the options should say pin.
No, they say chat, show non-video participants.
I'm sorry then, I'm not sure. Maybe you can't do that then? I'm not so sorry.
Maybe not. Okay. So why do I publish? I've had the experience for all the years I've been writing and sending my writing out to the world. The responses I get from people are literally, how could you possibly have known what's going on inside of me? And tremendous gratitude for that. So it feels like that's such a rich human exchange. And that's a kind of gift that I can give to people. There's a little passage in the introduction to this book, Longing, Poems of a Life. I've heard from those dear to me and from strangers alike that they have felt moved, comforted, graced by my words. All of us as readers are indebted to the courageous ones who lift the veils of human experience and say, "This is my truth. Let's speak truth to one another and see how it changes the world."
Thank you. Could I ask if that's a good segue to go into the first poem in the corner?
Sure, sure. All right. So I'm reading from the book, which I think has, I love this cover. I love this cover. It is so gorgeous. It's the artwork is from an Israeli artist, Asia Katz, who I think is now living in Caesarea. Many years ago, I bought this print, and then she was in Spa. Anyway, look her up online. She has gorgeous work. The first poem in the book, In the Corner. I see myself sitting on a small chair in the corner. I can't see if I am looking at a picture book or doing something with my hands. Perhaps not doing, just being. Small children, at least in those days, were allowed that. Actually, even today, the relief, agony, danger, being invisible. I think I am very quiet still. The sounds, the large people in the room. Sometimes in that corner, I am peaceful, absorbing my mother's presence, her aura, storing it up for when she disappears, like when the sun disappears behind a cloud. So that's a poem that came to me literally sitting as I described, very quiet, very still, just listening for words, listening for images. Yes, you can listen for images. And this memory came to me, really such a very early memory. And the rest of the poems in the book unfolded from that first poem. The poems, there are 7 sections. The first section is about early childhood, the second about adolescence, the third about young adulthood. The fourth is a series of poems about Jill as my mother was dying. And then kind of random section of a portrait gallery of some old dear friends. And then a section about the little town where I've lived for the last 26 years. And finally, the 7th section is kind of about the 7th decade. and what it's like to be in the seventh decade.
I found a lot of the poems in the book very deeply moving, and I've been working with you for years doing really personal work, but mostly I'm the one getting the work done on me. So I found myself really getting to know you in a new way, and really getting, a version of the whole story of your life in a way, because it really goes through that art. And there seems to be a theme you touched upon in what you said before, which is about becoming yourself, finding out who you are, about forming your identity. And there's a poem that really spoke to that we talked about together, was Red Enamel Chairs. I was wondering if you might read that next.
Sure. Red enamel chairs. Our first real home, a duplex apartment at the edge of the cornfields in a new development that boasts a communal laundry room and a communal pool. The small kitchen is separated from the dining area by swinging cafe doors. And when guests compliment the dinner, I call into the kitchen. They liked it. Our furniture, a bizarre mix: canopy bed, dresser, armoire from a fancy Manhattan emporium, a gift from his parents. Red bricks and boards configured into bookcases and a coffee table. An old oak rocker we spent a year stripping. Secondhand wood chairs I painted bright red enamel. Ubiquitous posters of the 60s. The first day he set out to work, I sat alone in that duplex apartment, looking at the bright red enamel chairs, cornfields out the window, feeling for all the world like Catherine Ross, the final scene of The Graduate, the back of the bus in her wedding gown next to Dustin Hoffman. We've escaped. And what now? And who am
And what now? And who am I? I love that ending so much. It really hit me when I read it. Like, I really felt, sometimes more than other times, I feel like poetry in general, not just yours, the ending is really the crown. It's really like what the whole thing is for. And that one, I really felt that you achieved something very beautiful with the build up to that ending. Yeah, well, could you speak about that what now, that process of forming an identity, and the place that your writing played in that?
Yeah. So I don't know how many people watching, and I guess a lot of people have signed up so they can watch when they're free later. But I wonder how many of you now remember The Graduate. Like, you remember seeing that movie. And I don't even know when I saw it that I understood the ending. I think it took a while for that to sink in. Particularly the Catherine Ross character has escaped. She's broken free from the expectations that her family and her culture have imposed on her. And she's sitting in the back of a bus in her wedding gown. I mean, like, we don't even know where this is going, literally. Where is this bus going? I experienced at least the decade of my 20s as what now and who am I? And I think that probably moved into my mid-30s. It's not at all easy to develop an identity, to establish an identity, to own an identity. And I'm wondering, I don't want to say it as a, declarative sentence, but I'm wondering, maybe that's more true for women. I mean, maybe it was more true for women of my generation who grew up in a world where we were very constricted about who we were supposed to be when we grew up. And so when we grew up, it was like, what am I doing now? Part of the answers to that question emerged for me in my writing. And the other part emerged in all the ways I put myself out in the world, all the times I summoned in high school. I went to a very special, amazing public Brooklyn high school, Erasmus Hall High School, unparalleled education. Oh! So, they had lots of electives. And in my sophomore year, maybe my junior year, I don't remember, I saw that there was a Shakespeare course. And I was really frightened. I thought, Shakespeare is just so, won't that be so difficult? And I don't know if I can do that. And what if I flunk out? And wouldn't that just be humiliating? And I decided, go for it. And I did. And despite my fears, it was a fabulous course. And I did as well as I usually did in high school, which was very well. That was a watershed for me. I think ever after that, when I felt this is scary, my response was, that means it's important. That means you should rise to the occasion. You should step up and say yes. So, I think I've hardly ever done anything that I wasn't initially scared of. A very nervous person, I guess. But the kinds of teaching I did as a young person, I worked with community college students. They were almost all adults. I really thought about who are they and what do they need? And how can I be of help? And those questions have traveled with me to running ongoing dialogue groups on the West Bank, to traveling to Russia and Belarus and Ukraine. I think I'm the only person I know 3-week book tour in Ukraine. Zelensky in his old days, in his former identity, would have had so much fun with that. This American poet whose book was translated, and she's here on a 3-week book tour. Oh. All right, we can't go there. Heart just ripping, breaking. Spending a summer at Seeds of Peace and working with people from conflict areas around the world. Somehow getting out of my own head was a key to figuring out who I was. Repeatedly trying to ask myself as a young person, we're just ruminative, not moving along. So sometimes my answers are so long, I think I can't remember back to your question. Did I answer it or?
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah, it was beautiful. No, really, I'm just trying to make space for you to talk about, things you want to talk about and things people want to hear you talk about. These interesting things. And actually, the next theme I thought might be a good way into some of your poems, and something you seem to come back to a lot and talk about a lot is actually a nice compliment to what you just mentioned about like getting out of yourself and going out there and helping others. I wanted to ask you about feeling at home. It's also a big theme in a lot of the poems in this book about, first of all, just feeling at home in yourself, and also the homes that you've made. In a way one home, but in a way many homes that you've made. And you write so beautifully about some of your experiences with that. I'm wondering if maybe you might discuss that. Maybe you might read Shabbos together if you'd like to, as part of that, and what comes up for you around that idea right now.
Okay. So yes, home is a very big theme in this book, as is the question of being invisible and visible. They're so intricately related. I didn't grow up in a safe home. There was violence in my home. There was what we now call economic insecurity, which means we were poor. and my father was sometimes out of work, and difficult things which are there in the first 2 sections. So I think that the thought of having a home, creating a home, had perhaps even inordinate importance for me. I'd love to read Shabbos together. The first time we made Shabbos together in our own home, it wasn't really our home. It was your third floor walk-up, and we weren't even engaged yet. I had cooked chicken, my first chicken, with a whole bulb of garlic. A clove, a bulb, who knew? My mother never used garlic. And we sat down at that secondhand chrome table in the kitchen. It was all so ugly that we turned out the lights. Only the Shabbos candles flickered. And then you made Kiddush. I sat there and wept. Oh God, you have been so good to me. Finally, for the first time in my life, you gave me something I wanted. This man whose soul is the soul of Ein Gedi. We will be silent together. We will open our flowers in each other's presence. And indeed, we have bloomed through the years.
Thank you.
More than anything else, a home has to be. A home is nothing if it's not safe. Last line again. Okay. And indeed, we have bloomed through the years. I'll tell you something funny, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
You remember when I used to come, when you were a student, right?
Yeah.
So I came to, when I came to New York, I worked with students at Hoveve, at JTS, at HEC, geographically, right? North to south. Hebrew College in Boston and RRC in Philly. I had never had an office. It was kind of a dream of mine, like someday I'll have an office. Like that's really what gives you the stamp, of being an adult. You have an office. So instead I was a vagabond. And I worked with students north to south at all these 5 different schools, 5 different gave me to work, and each was their own. In a way, my favorite was at HUC because the subway ran right under the basement room they gave me. and about every 6 minutes or so, you'd hear the subway rumbling, like shaking from underneath you.
Wow.
But wherever I went, I stopped off at a bodega and bought some flowers. So I came to whatever school I was at, and I had, a little bouquet of fresh flowers. And then later, sometimes I put down a nice cloth, a batik kind of a hippie thing. And my mug, I went through like a variety of mugs that I packed and I brought with me. That created a home. I felt like that was a home. And I opened that home to each of you. You were sitting in my home.
Wow. I remember the flowers. And for me, I remember it really landed with me as a gesture of care and generosity that you had gone out of your way to do that consistently and to bring some beauty and some nature into a very sterile environment. So yeah, it left an impression, definitely, and I think it did help us open, as your poem says. People open, people bloom, and I think it did have that effect.
Yeah. There are rabbis I worked with who were as students who told me years later, I always keep fresh flowers in my office. And I have to make a confession here. I learned to do that from my husband, Edward Feld, who's here on the call. When he was rabbi in residence at JTS, he brought flowers every week. So often I would take like one stem from his bouquet and I put it in a little vase and carry it with me. Yeah.
Really, where it's due. That did make it home. And thank you for welcoming us into it and sharing it with us. And part of what I want to ask you about is about expanding that home to the world. There's a definite feeling in you as a person and your poetry about caring about the world, really like an expansive heart. And I wanted to ask you about the connection between how you see working on ourselves and healing ourselves and tikkun olam, fixing and healing our whole world. And as a poem really speaks to this, I was wondering if you want to read it, the world we've longed for since the very beginning. And anything else, of course, that you want to share about this.
Okay. The world we have longed for since the very beginning. I should say it's dedicated to my oldest brother, Warren. When you read the book, I think you'll understand why. Another day, I asked a young rabbi, when? I am surprised by his answer. I feel safe when I am seen. No, I think, not me. I return to this question, but again, insight continues to elude me. Finally, in slow motion, an epiphany. The question demands a wider scope. I look back over an adult life, moments, stories, images, the private sphere and work. I see myself making a home, many years of faces glowing around my Shabbos table, impressionable students, curious, watchful. By candlelight, we talk, we sing, we sit in comfortable silence. Teaching remedial writing, a community college adjunct, career army, waitresses, retired cops, homemakers, so full of shame at what they don't know. I know shame. I see them, care about them and their stories, comment on their papers in detail, with interest, respect. In the first Intifada, I am on the West Bank, accompanying Palestinians and Israelis as they dare to be honest, vulnerable with one another, to work at listening. Amidst anger, anguish, the hardest thing, to break through suspicion, inherited hatred, to see the face of the other. Why me? Someone was needed. An 11th century town in Belarus with 3 generations of Jewish women. I widen their view of prayer, welcome them to their place at the table. In Kyiv, Solomon University, I read poems about love and irony, wicked secrets of a feminist life. A fiery-eyed young woman, Stalin is turning over in his grave. At Seeds of Peace, a man in dialogue, out of control, threatening, shaking, raging. I move to sit next to him, my hand on his back, anchoring him, willing him with my hand to calm, soften, breathe. I feel the violence of his shaking. I just keep my hand there. And possibilities. Later in Chicago, Portland, Palo Alto, in Miami, Maine, Ohio, Georgia, I am reading my poems, painful and true, re-entering the feelings, afterwards leading deep conversation. The truth of the poems has allowed space for courageous connection. How we all ache to speak to one another in truth. Mentoring rabbis, seasoned and new, from my 100-year-old house, in public spaces and in small rooms where I come bearing flowers, a colorful cloth, a favorite hand-thrown mug. In these scenes and more, wherever I sit and listen, I cast a circle. Here you are safe. No harm will come to you on my watch. When do I feel safe? The question is too small for me. It's not about my safety. I climb over my fears. They are not interesting. I break rules, create rules. Here cruelty is forbidden. Here we trust, respect, protect one another from harm. Here together we dare to make the world we want to share. The world we have longed for since the very beginning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to change the view for everyone so we can go back to the gallery view. I'm gonna try and make that happen anyway, so I can because now it's hiding. Okay, at least now I have gallery view. Folks should have the option of gallery view if they want to. I wanted to open it up, see if anyone had anything they wanted to ask you or share with you in response to your beautiful poems and your words. Does anyone want, feel free just to raise your hand if you like to ask a question. Otherwise, I have some things also. Dr. Allen, please.
Merle, I'm wondering two things. I was born in 1949, and I always say that I'm part of the 40s people, not the 50s people. It's a different model. And I was wondering what year you were born.
47.
47. I thought so. I went to Sheepshead Bay High School. So the second thing I want to ask you, I was talking to Roger Kametz recently, and something that I hadn't been familiar with is this idea of prose poem, a prose poem. And I feel also, but they're not prose poems. And I have kind of a similar orientation that you have, which is I have a kind of either spiritual or emotional angst going on for myself. And as I'm writing the poem, there's a healing that's taking place from a knowledge that I don't know that I have, and it starts to appear. And I think that's what you do as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I would say so.
Can you say a little something about prose poems? Because I don't feel for myself, especially when you're reading them, and I have a severe hearing loss, so I'm reading the captions. It doesn't exactly feel like poetry to me. So can you talk about that?
Not today. Um, Alicia Ostreicher, do you know of her? She's an amazing Jewish poet, winner of National Jewish Book Award and many poetry awards. I showed her my first poems in, I guess like maybe 1985. And I'll never forget what she said. She said, "They're beautiful and they're true."
Mm-hmm.
I have no training in poetry.
Yes.
Zero.
Wait,
So,
wait, I'm on.
I remember, well, Eddie will remember this. Somebody needs to meet. I submitted some of my earliest poems to a Jewish journal, which no longer exists. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, the editor wrote back this lengthy explanation, this lengthy rejection letter, and he said, you know, because we are friends and we were in the Chavurah together, and you know, you're writing about things that are so important, and you know, I have this long friendship with Eddie, and he goes on and on and on. And you know that joke about when there's a but in the sentence, what came before? It's really he says, but I just don't like the way they look on the page. And he was right, you know, and so I've taught myself over the years. For me, poetry is about honesty, depth of feeling, language, rhythm, and I would never teach poetry because I'm really not, it's like, that's not my field. So
Thank you. Thank you. Could you put the name of that poet that you mentioned in the chat, please? The woman who said that your work was beautiful and true.
Yeah, if someone could do that for me, it's Alicia Ostreicher, if anybody knows who she is. So
Rabbi, can you do that, please? Would you be able to do that?
Sure, sure, I'll do that. Oh, someone did it. Janet, thank you very much for doing it. Thank you, Dr. Ellen. Thank you for that answer, Mel.
So Annie has had her hand up.
Yeah, Annie, please.
You're muted. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't care what they're called, but you spoke such heart and soul truth that I feel the extreme joy and sorrow at the same time, filled with meaning. And I can't thank you enough. They are so true. Born 1938, Brooklyn, New York, graduated from Erasmus High School, 1955. And you spoke truths in the most, I can't think of the words. I think we had pretty similar childhoods. And now I understand why home is so important to me. I didn't put flowers every place, but I used to have bowls of seeds and nuts and raisins, and I was feeding people Jewish mama every place I worked, all the schools I worked in, all the places. Very interesting. But I see your flowers in you. I feel them, and somehow the way that you tell the truth doesn't have bitterness. You're telling some very hard, painful truths, but they heal. You are a healer. Thank you so much. And I love to hear my mother tongue spoken, Brooklynese. It's so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have never tried to get rid of it. It's like, this is it, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Mel, there was a question on the chat from David. He said, you mentioned to peel off the layers as a way of discovering yourself. Could you talk more about that process and how it works for you, please?
It's all about listening. It's really, it's something, maybe it's not so easy to describe. Just, it's interesting when I say, you know, I'm a self-taught poet. I'm kind of a self-taught listener. Although if you think about it, I hope you each can call up in your minds someone you've known, maybe more than one person, who's just a really good listener. Does that have meaning? Does that and what it's like to be in the presence of a person who really can listen. It's like all their stuff, you know, all their issues, all their whatever is just out of the way, and they're just listening and receiving and being a vessel and holding you. Amazing gift. That's the kind of listening I'm talking about when I try to listen to myself. And then words come. Words which have the closest thing to purity. You know, I'm not lying to myself. I'm not, they're just like fire. They're just, and for me, that's all in the realm of the sacred. That's all holy. When someone sits with you and listens, when you sit with someone and listen, that's holy, that's sacred.
Thank you, Mel. That's beautiful. I think we just have time for one more. And Tiferet, would you like to ask?
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful. I feel honored to have heard this. Thank you, Merle. Valued so much watching you read. And I was thinking about, as I was watching you, your sincerity. And just now when you were talking about deep listening, I think what I saw was you listening to yourself again. You were so present with your poem. And it also then ties in with what Rabbi Daniel sent out on our WhatsApp group about questions and Elohim, and it's God is within the question. And when we ask the question, it is, as you said, it is holy because we are tapping into that God presence that is evolving and expanding. And I'm so profoundly grateful. I could weep. I could weep. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have to say, I am moved by all of you. I mean, really, really, what a gift this has been for me. Which is exactly what I feel when I work with my rabbis, you know, it's like, it's a gift on both sides.
Certainly is. Mel, thank you so much.
Thank you
Mel,
for bringing me.
thank you, friend. Thank you, everyone, for your presence and for everyone who shared. And
Has there been someplace about like how to get the book?
there has and all the emails. And actually, I just wanted to say again, you know, personally, I haven't spent a day reading a book of poetry non-stop in the way I did with this one, and not want to stop. And it's medicine. It's just it's really very, very, very powerful medicine. I think Annie said something to that effect, and it's really true. So I bless you to treat yourselves if you haven't already. And everyone will be sent the recording, and also, you know, with the link again for the book, so you'll get it again there.
Great.
So thank you, Mel. Thank you, everyone, and wish everyone a very peaceful Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Merle. Shabbat shalom. That was great.
Shabbat shalom.
Nice to make contact again.
Daniel, thank you for sharing your wonderful teacher with us.
And Yeshikoach.
Looking to you.
Generous.
Beautiful.
Can't we just all hang out now?